Hello, I'm MrShine, back again for some more Hearthstone arena goodness. Today we will be tackling a Priest draft, a hero that many consider to be one of the weaker arena options. I tend to have lots of success with Priest in arena, primarily due to my conservative board-oriented and control playstyle. After this drafting guide is completed, I'll be following it up with a gameplay guide where I play through the deck and see how it fares. But enough about that, on to the draft! So in this video I'm going to be doing something a little different. While I'm going to be explaining my choices just like every other arena drafting tutorial video out there, I'm going to be organizing this video like a quiz that you can take. That's right, it's summertime, but class is still in session. Before each pick, I'll specify a point on the video where you can pause, decide what you would pick, and then based on the card you pick, you'll score points. The closer you get to the best card in that trio, the more points you'll get. At the end of the video, I'll have a place where you can add up your points and see what your overall draft score is. Let's see how similar your draft looks compared to mine. And without further ado, it's draft time. 3 points if you selected Gadgetzan Auctioneer. None of these cards are great, but Gadgetzan has the highest ceiling and has the best chance of doing something useful. Pine-Size Summoner is sometimes a serviceable 2-drop, but gets crushed when it faces a 2-3. The Battlecry is sometimes useful, but not consistent enough to make her worth choosing. The Young Priestess can be good in tailored rush decks where you can apply a lot of pressure very quickly. That's not what priest decks tend to look like, plus mages, rogues, and druids eat her for breakfast and you pretty much end up throwing a card in the garbage. My choice was Northshire Cleric. This is not a card you play as a 1-drop in most cases unless you're going second and the opponent played something like a 2-1 on the first turn. At other times the Cleric can be played on the same turn you draw a card, and becomes an immediate threat that must be dealt with by the opponent if they don't want you to have a draw machine. Honorable mention goes to both Stormwind Knight and Mind Vision, okay cards that can be serviceable, but aren't especially strong in most cases. Power Word Shield is a fantastic card. It replaces itself with a new card, is very cheap, and often allows one of your minions to kill an enemy minion of comparable value and survive. What's more, it synergizes very well with the Priest Hero ability. Compared to the other cards in this trio, it's an easy pick. Archmage is okay, but 4 attack for 6 mana isn't that great, plus who knows how many spells an arena deck is going to get. Divine Spirit is the obvious loser in this scenario, the other cards simply do so much more, and Divine Spirit needs combo pieces to be useful most of the time. It might provide more HP than Power Word Shield, but it's more expensive and doesn't give you a new draw. No thanks. Hopefully everyone picked Shadow Word Pain here. It's excellent early game removal that sometimes can live the dream of killing a Water Elemental, Sen'jin Shieldmaster, Fen Creeper, or Gurubashi Berserker. Priests have a hard time with removal, and with a focus on minions in the arena, you're almost always going to have a target for this card. Inner Fire is one of those combo piece cards that is even less useful than Divine Spirit as a standalone, and Grimscale Oracle is a trashy 1/1 for 1 that not only requires you to have other Murlocs to be useful, but can sometimes inadvertently buff your enemy's Murlocs in the board. Stay well clear of that one. This one was tough, and I have a feeling there will be some disagreements here. I just mentioned that priests have a hard time with removal. Another thing priests have a hard time with is making sure that 2-drop lands. The priest has the worst hero ability for turn 2, since rarely they'll have damage taken, and they can't heal above their max HP, whereas a warrior can at least stack a bit of armor on top. Because of this, you need to make sure you have 2-drops, and Bloodfen Raptor is a trusty 3/2 that can give you a little bit of board presence. Honorable mention goes to Gnomish Inventor, a decent card that replaces itself, but in my opinion is a bit too weak to keep you ahead on tempo. Priests rarely have problems with card draw since their hero ability can keep cards in play, so I don't think Gnomish is best here. Thoughtsteal isn't a bad card, but you never know what you're going to get, so it's too unreliable here when next to a trusty 3/2. I already talked about the merits of Power Word Shield, and the other two simply aren't good enough to beat it here. Flesh-Eating Ghoul requires things on the board already to be an above average 3-drop, although in the late game it can sometimes get scary. Mega Rager is a loser in this trio. Its 1 HP makes it far too easy to get killed for free, or by a wimpy token. The card's only good on an open board against a warrior, priest, warlock, or hunter, some of the least played heroes in the arena. Harvest Golem is the king of value, always being a pain in the side of the opponent with its obnoxious death rattle. Argent Squire is good and constructed, and is also annoying, but it usually doesn't do enough in arena unless you have a lot of buffing minions, like Abusive Sergeant, Shattered Sun Cleric, and Dark Iron Dwarf. Lord of the Arena is okay, but its stats are below average for a 6 mana cost minion, and its 5 HP is a bit lacking for a taunt card. It usually dies to something that was played more cheaply. This This draw was a stinker. Mass Dispel is the best of the bad, in part because it can replace itself. Lightwell is usually a good way to flush a card down the toilet, and Mana Addict is even worse. They tend to be negative value unless you have a bunch of combo pieces or spells, while at least Mass Dispel gives you a card and can do something useful from time to time. Speaking of negative value, there's only one choice here and it's Gnomish Inventor. It replaces itself and has more stats than the Patriarch, even without the taunt. The Patriarch hardly ever kills another card, and the Boar's 1/1 body isn't worth the digital cardboard the card is printed on, even with its charge effect. Even if you get value from the Boar to finish off the remaining HP of an enemy minion, you still spent a whole card to accomplish the same thing a mage can do for free for 2 mana. I know I talked about 2-drops being important, but Kodo is too tasty not to pick up here. Kodo usually can find a target in the arena, and when it does, it is already in the 2-for-1 territory, sometimes able to do even more. It also has a decent body with its 5 HP that can sometimes get more value with the Priest's Hero ability. Honorable mention goes to the Wild Pyro 3-2-for-2 that sometimes can do even more. Master Swordsmith is bad and too slow to pick. It has the same problem as the Mana Addict in that it's too easy to kill for free. Shattered Sun is a great 3-drop that can sometimes help to get a free trade for one of your minions. It's serviceable as a standalone 3, and with great upside. Mind Vision has already been discussed as being okay, however Silence is garbage. Ironbeak Owl at least gives a 2/1 body for its 2 mana cost, and even that's not a good card. Steer clear from Silence. Tiger is the only choice here. A wonderful 5-drop that gives you initiative and can set up combos. Raid Leader is too wimpy for a 3-drop, even if it sometimes can give you value if you have a huge board. Of course, if you have a huge board already, Raid Leader probably wasn't integral to your success. And Wisp is a waste of digital cardboard, much like Grimscale Oracle and Boar. Being free doesn't make up for the fact that it's never going to be relevant at any point in the game, ever. Maybe Rogues can use it to set up a combo, but that's about it. Congratulations! Everyone is correct in this pick. The reason I say that is because all these cards are average and I can see justification to picking any one of them. Iron Fur is a trusty 3/3 taunt for 3, Archmage is an adequate 6-drop compared to the alternatives, or this could have been a good time to test your luck with a Thought Steal. I went with Grizzly, but I think all are defensible here. I'm not faulting anyone for picking Shadow Word Pain here, so full points if you did it. I ended up going with Lightspawn though, because while yes, Silence can crush it, I already have 2 Power Word Shields, and I also already have 1 Kodo as well as another Shadow Word Pain. Too much situational removal can gunk up your hand and make your play too passive, so I went with Lightspawn, who's best when played on an empty board, but usually is serviceable enough. At least I think we can all agree that these two are better than Mind Blast, a card that doesn't impact the board at all, and is only useful to burst down a near-death enemy, not something your priest deck is often going to be geared towards. We talked about 2-drops, and Loot Hoarder is a 2-drop that can replace itself. Even if you play it and force the enemy mage to ping, you still took up their turn and got your card back. Acolyte of Pain is basically a slower version of Loot Hoarder that has more upside, but it's harder to achieve that upside with Priest. Priestess of Elune is too expensive for its stats, and its battle cry is mediocre. Certainly not the choice here. Another set of mediocre picks. Booty Bay is same stats as Priestess of Elune for 1 mana cheaper, but I'm not happy with either of them. Argent Squire we talked about before, and maybe I'm being too pessimistic with that card, but it's just not as good as it is in Constructed. Now there's a 1-drop I'm actually happy to see. Worgen Infiltrator is the exception to the rule in that it's much harder to remove, and many times it can trade up with a 2-drop to establish early initiative. The other cards are laughable. I already talked about the Oracle, and the Circle of Healing can be great if you have a Soul Priest, but if you don't have one, it's quite bad. I'm not going to bank on a rare my deck doesn't have yet. Speaking of a rare my deck doesn't have yet, going from a series of all bad picks to a series of all good picks. I would be happy with any of these cards in my deck. At this point though, the winner has to go to the Argent Commander, a solid late game card that's very flexible and can do some work. Soul Priest comes a turn too late for the Circle of Healing to be relevant, although if Argent wasn't here I'd probably take it because if not answered it can give some serious value. Knife Juggler is awesome, but even though we like 3/2s, the other cards are just too impactful for us to pass up on here. Another series of doozies. Elune is finally matched up with other cards bad enough to consider, and I decided to go to the overcosted late game card route, mainly because I don't have too many 6-drops in the deck. Rifleman is equally bad, but the Ping Battle Cry might be useful to sway some folks. I didn't dock points if you took it. Mogushan Warden has some synergy in a priest deck, but even so I still don't think it's worth taking, even when compared to other garbage. Even if it's a wall for a bit of time that I can heal up, I just don't want to be investing mana into a time sink that's really not going to kill anything. I already have a Shadow Word Pain and a Kodo, and too much of that sort of conditional value can sometimes weaken the deck. Defender of Argus is a great option here. Hopefully I can have some things on the board to give it some value. Under no circumstances should Young Priestess be chosen here, however, for reasons previously discussed. Blightspawn has weaknesses, but it's better than the other two. The Owl at least represents some sort of utility to go along with its 1 HP body. The Magma Rager is untouchable here. Holy Nova is a slightly more expensive and Priest synergistic Consecration, and Consecration is great. Holy Nova is about as great, and definitely better than the Cleric or Gnomish in this series. I bet many people would choose Tiger here, and I usually would be inclined to agree with you because it's fantastic. However, Priest excels with big dumb dudes you could heal, and if I can survive until late game, War Golem is actually pretty good for Priest. Plus my 5 slot is already pretty full at this point, and I can afford a bit of late game beef now. Anyone who picks Wisp here needs to immediately see me after class. Scarlet Crusader is a very solid 3-drop. Even if it's 1 HP, it presents a problem since it can trade with other 3-drops and also requires something extra from the opponent to deal with the shield, unless they want to get 2 for 1. Some classes can get around the shield pretty easily, but they often have to invest some extra mana into it in the early game, and if a mage wants to waste their turn 3 turn to ping and trade another minion into it, I'm happy to take the tempo shift. Torn Warrior is really only defensible in mage where it can be self-pinged, and Nightblade is hardly defensible anywhere. At least my Gadgetzan Auctioneer, who is a 4/4 for 5, has a chance to be useful. 3 hero damage will rarely be the difference between winning and losing a match. Ogre is a fantastic late game minion. The extra HP allows it to survive against many other 6-drops, plus as a priest it's a great card to stick onto the board and set up some future healing. Ancient Brewmaster is also good, and there are battle cry minions in my deck that could be useful if they were brewed back, but it just isn't as value as an Ogre. Leopard Gnome is a fantastic aggressive constructed deck card, but again we're in Arena, and there's no place for it here for us to pick up. I value Ironfur Grizzly over Thoughtsteel, but at this point I think Thoughtsteel takes the cake over Panther. It's not that Panther's bad, it just isn't good, and it's susceptible to Consecration, Forked Lightning, Cleave, and pretty much any 2-drop. It's basically a 4 damage removal spell that takes a turn to go into effect and has a chance of being removed, and I think in this case we can pass it up. Silverback Patriarch is one of the cards that the Panther can trade favorably against, so that should give you a sense of my feelings about that card. All of them are decent in Priest, but at this point, with only a few picks left, I have to go with a 3/2 2-drop. As I mentioned before, I have some decent battle cries in this deck, so that could be a perk. Earthen Ring is great, but I really need to focus on 2-drops here. And War Golem, as I mentioned before, is good, but at this point, again, 2-drops are just the thing that I need here. Early game needs shoring, so even if Shadow Word Pain wasn't paired up with this garbage, it would still likely be the pick here. I already talked about Magma Rager being bad, and Corehound is a more expensive version of Magma Rager essentially. It has more stats, but they're still way too low as far as HP is concerned for a 7-mana minion. Those 2 cards will almost always trade down. Given the choices, Earthen Ring is perfectly fine here. It's a good 3 that synergizes with Northshire Cleric and Youthful Brewmaster. I already talked about how Panther isn't that great as a 3, and Lord of the Arena is an expensive 6-drop. It usually doesn't do enough. Epic cards, OMG! Too bad they're fairly lackluster. Blood Knight has to be the choice. I also have 2 Divine Shield minions in this deck, so it isn't completely crazy to think it might go off sometime during the run. Mind Games is a gamble card, and the 4 mana turn is one of the most important turns in the game. Do you really want to spend it by rolling the dice? It might hit big, but most people in the arena stock up on 2s and 3s, so it's more likely that it'll give us less value than the mana we spent to cast it. Doomsayer is interesting, but still bad. He's best when you build a deck around him that's focused on control, but that's not going to be possible often in the arena. Furthermore, as Priest you want to focus on establishing the board, which means anytime you have the lead, he's probably going to be a dead card in your hand. Well, there we go, we've reached the end of the draft. A quick recap before we check the scores. Let's review the deck's pros and cons and see how we'll want to play it. Pros. Some decent early game removal and control with 2 Shadow Word Pains and 2 Power Word Shields. If I can stick something on the board early, I have a chance to get some momentum rolling. Combined with a few strong late game cards like Ogre, Commander, War Golem, Tiger, and Kodo, I hope they'll help me pull through the finish line. Also, another pro is card draw. Northshire Cleric, Thoughtsteel, Gnomish Inventor, Mass Dispel, Loot Hoarder, and 2 Power Word Shields. That's a lot for a Priest deck. Hopefully I should never be in top deck mode. Some cons. Some questionable mid and late game cards. Priestess of Elune is ugly, as is Booty Bay and Mass Dispel. If a late spawn gets silenced, I could be in a world of hurt going against strong follow-up plays, and I'll need to really rely on Ogre, Argent Commander, and War Golem to swoop in when I need them. Another con is I'm lacking some of the big swingy Priest cards, such as Shadow Word Death, Shadow Madness, Cabal, Shadow Priest, and Mind Control. Other than a few Shadow Word Pains and Holy Nova, I'm very light on removal, so someone with a solid late game curve is going to be a hassle. Predictions. I'm going to hope that my card draw and relatively strong early game will put me in position to close out games before it gets too terribly late. Let's shoot for 8 wins with this deck. And now, without further ado, let's wrap this guide up and take a look at our quiz results. Hopefully you've had a chance to add up the scores you would have received on your own personal draft. Let's bring up the MrShine scoreboard. There you go. Hopefully you're closer to the top of this board than the bottom. Don't feel too bummed out though if you're way off. Arena is something that needs practice and a lot of repetition before you really start to get a feel for what cards you should be drafting and when you should go for the value card versus something that really fits your curve better. Well, that's it for now. In my next Hearthstone Players video, I plan on showing a bit of this deck in action, and hopefully we'll be able to hit our 8-win goal and then some. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to stay tuned on HearthstonePlayers.com for more of my Arena videos, and you're welcome to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see other gaming content. I've been MrShine, and I'll see you next time!